Well, hello, my fellow Americans and all fighters for justice. Please lend your ears. I'm Pamela Anchang, editor and founder of the Immigrant magazine. I cannot thank you enough for the massive response to my monologue, Black Lives Matter is no joke. I received lots of responses, plenty of harsh insults, and even one where I was called a monkey. Another threatened to throw me out of a plane if I was sitting next to him in an airplane. All because I believe that if we claim that all lives matter, then Black lives should equally matter. And we have seen that today that is not the reality when it comes on issues of inequality and justice. I received many videos of various schools of thought, including speeches by Miss Candace Owens, a successful African-American thought leader with a great handle of facts and stats. I received numerous responses from African-Americans, Africans, white Americans, people from all walks of life, which gave me a lot of insight into the community of Black people in America, and the spectrum could not have been any wider than the Grand Canyon, I might add. I would first of all like to address Miss Candace Owens on some of the issues. The reason I really want to respond to Candace is because my response to the Breitbart and Nestride Yumga tirade, as I call it, elicited a lot of responses that had Candace as one of the references. Some were positive and some were not so positive. However, I would like to address this because I see that as a thought leader that she is, she wields a lot of influence. And so I would like to give my take on some issues. So Candace, I really want to start by applauding your bravery and determination to choose your own path in this movement for helping Black people with so much conviction. I admire that. As far as intent is concerned, you and I are definitely on the same page. I, however, would like to give you just another perspective on some of the things that you assert. Let me establish that I am an African immigrant, and I have to say that listening to you, I learned a lot. Thank you for those facts. In fact, I think it's a lot of research that someone could benefit from just listening to you. But I was also taken aback because you did not seem to acknowledge the fact that on this issue of Black justice and racial issues that have to do with people of African descent, the Black community is more heterogeneous today than it might have been 100 years ago. We are now made up of Africans, Latino Blacks, Caribbean Blacks, and descendants of slaves. And therefore, when you lump us all and talk about Black people, you are not completely being, factual. As an immigrant, I am getting to have a better understanding of hate in America today. And it is very scary. A response from James Burks, the founder of the African Marketplace Cultural Fair here in California, a fair that created jobs, tons of jobs for our people and launched so many African businesses. I was very impacted. Today, James is involved in special projects as director for the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, continuing to incorporate the ideas of economic empowerment of the Black arts community. His response to me drew my attention to some of the challenges that descendants of slavery have had to deal with for over 400 years and counting. He also reiterated the contributions that in spite of these challenges and what they all went through, that they did for my continent, which is for everybody of African descent, a motherland. The contributions that they made in helping us transcend apartheid colonialism, and all the things that we have had to endure as a people. And he lamented that as people of African descent here in the United States, we are not coalescing together. And so that's why, my sister, I want to talk to you. So to tell you the truth, as a new African immigrant, I was misled myself in my judgment of who our people were. Thanks to media, thanks to the content that we consume, I assumed, like everybody else, that African Americans were lazy, probably thugs, and all the things, the stigma that we have been fed, rather than look into getting to know our people. And so when you lump everybody in the category where it seems like they deserve what's coming to them, it's a disservice to our people. It did take me a while to catch on, but in time I've come to understand. Having children of my own, and 2 boys I might add, has shifted me in a new direction. Thinking about the legal troubles that besiege African men, black men in this country, when I'm raising 2 of my own, in the discipline of my African heritage, and yet I worry about what lies out there for them. They are not always perfect, our children are not, but you can expect them to have a little scuffle or 2 in school. However, it would seem that the punishment hardly ever meets the crime. Just recently, 2 young teenagers were handcuffed, probably arrested, I'm not sure about the details, for jaywalking. And I think about my 13-year-old daughter who visits a friend across the street every day, and I have to say, be careful, watch how you cross the streets. My sons go to play basketball all the time, and I worry about what will happen to them. These 2 young men were on their way to see their relatives when they were arrested, put in handcuffs. The trauma that could really put in a child, a 13-year-old or 16-year-old, even a 21-year-old, even me, I just couldn't fathom that. So my sister, I do fear that your assessment of things may be a little too one-sided. You've been very vocal about your distaste for the outpouring of support for the late George Floyd, wondering why so many people, why the world at large is coming out and crying for justice for George. I really want you to look deeply and see maybe some of us are misguided, and that we want justice for George and we want justice for everyone. Unless you have a better opinion and one that acknowledges the original sin that is embedded in slavery of this country, you must understand that to some, being black is a death sentence. It suffices to be in the mall and you're not sure if you're going to go home. And so I have put my support behind movements that are fighting for justice for black people, because this is my reality. Some commenters said, go back to Africa. I would love to. Unfortunately, I am here now because my country, like most African countries and other countries of other immigrants, is in turmoil, political turmoil, economic turmoil, so many reasons. And by the way, this is a nation of immigrants. And so we come here seeking refuge. So I think I deserve to stay. And I am going to do just that. But staying here means working hand in hand with you to make life better for everyone. So yes, all lives do matter. But how can all lives matter if black lives do not fit in this equation? Now, I am not a member of the Black Lives Movement, which emerged in the summer of 2013 after George Zimmerman's acquittal for the shooting death of the young black teen Trayvon Martin. It began, if I recall very well, as a hashtag Black Lives Matter. However, I do think that they do a great job fighting against injustice for black people. So, my sister, the cry here is not so much whether it's a criminal, a good person. It's about the fact that everyone deserves their day in court. The same right that is accorded white folks. We have rarely ever seen or heard a police brutality incident where a white male has lost his life at the hands of police officers. As a matter of fact, if I look clearly, according to the Washington Post study, it goes thus: even though the number of black and unarmed people fatally shot by police has declined since 2015, whether armed or not, black people are still shot and killed at a disproportionately higher rate than white people by the police. So when you look at that stat, how can you explain it? You might say they were thugs, but we all now know through video footage that some of the killings do not involve gunshots. For example, Eric Garner, who was videotaped pleading for air, just like George Floyd, he couldn't breathe. He was videotaped pleading for air in New York while the police officer's arm literally strangled him. Freddie Gray died of severe spinal injury because he was tossed into a police van, shackled, handcuffed, but not wearing a seatbelt. And today the outrage surrounding George Floyd's death began when video from Minneapolis showed Floyd handcuffed behind his back, on the ground, gasping, "I can't breathe," as a white officer drove his knee on his neck. A black man, like he was garbage. We're talking about a human being. The officer held it for nearly 9 minutes, and for almost 3 of those minutes, Floyd was unresponsive, and the police officer held on. So again, I've heard you say you do not condone his death because the police officer did wrong, but by the same breath, the reference of his checkered past by you seems to validate that he deserved it. Whereas on the other hand, in a not too far history, I recall James Alex Fields Jr., the white nationalist driver who plowed his car into a group of counter-protesters at a rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, killing one and injuring dozens. Do you know what he got? Guess. He did not get a death sentence. He did not get a death sentence. He had his day in court. He pleaded guilty, and he's serving life for hate crimes. Think about that. At least he got his day in court for murdering, for killing and injuring dozens of people. George Floyd was being arrested for $20 for a $20 infraction, and he lost his life. That's it, Candace. Have you forgotten also the clear case of systemic injustice with the affluenza case, the famous case where Ethan Couch mounted a defense of luxury, basically, for murdering people? He killed 4 people and had THC on a drug patch. And THC is a psychoactive component of the cannabis plant. And he was sentenced for how long? Guess what? 10 years of probation for drunken driving that killed 4 people and seriously injured 2 others. You know what the defense was? He was a victim of luxury, a product of wealthy, privileged parents who never set limits for him. If one of our kids had been in that kind of trouble, Candace, let's be honest, and you just give me a response. What do you think would have been the judge's decision? Oh, you're too spoiled. You don't understand right from wrong. You're a white kid. And yet, a young man is arrested for jaywalking. If that's not racism, I don't know what else it is, because it's done repeatedly. One incident we might say, oh, was a bad cop. Over and over and people lose their lives, Candace? I don't think so. And yet, you have cited the substance revealed to have been in George Floyd's system as if they were reason for his death or bad behavior. None of whatever was found in his system has been proven to have been the source of his death or his demise. I wonder, wouldn't it have been better for George to have had his day in court, just like the two mentioned above? Mr. Affluenza, Mr. Fields. I think George deserved better than that. I know you dwell on the issue of black on black crime. I have always pondered about that myself. Why are we killing each other? Why? Crying out loud. While that's a discussion to be had, I just think that right now might not be the right timing for it. I submit that a serious conversation needs to be had so we can stop hurting each other. I mean, we're already being hurt enough by police officers, by the system. We can't return home to get killed by our own. We can't afford to. We'll become an endangered species, right? So I just think, Candace, that sometimes we might be misguided. We're not glorifying crime by any means, but we believe, though, you and I think, should agree that the law should be equally applied to everyone, whether rich, poor, affluent, black, Asian, white, regardless of gender, everybody, sexual orientation, doesn't matter. We all should have the same justice. Just in case that's not enough, I just have a couple more. Breonna Taylor, killed by police serving a no-knock warrant, who shot her 8 times in her home. Ahmaud Arbery, a black jogger, chased down and shot to death in Georgia. And most recently, this makes me laugh. I'm laughing because I can't cry. An outstanding bird watcher in New York, in Central Park. A viral video was released of a white woman weaponizing her white privilege to call the police as a threat against him, where she stated categorically, I'm gonna call the police to say a black man is threatening my dog and I. Wow, 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 wow. Can you believe it? That's how blatantly it's out there. And how can you, in all honesty, say there's no racism in this country and that black people are just not doing what they should be doing and they're always in the wrong places? As a black parent, today in America, George Floyd may not have been the ideal role model for many people, and certainly for the children. Certainly he wasn't perfect, and we all agree on that. But that is not the issue. Why his death provided for the world to start focusing on justice for black lives. Ghanaian American writer and global opinions editor for the Washington Post, Karen Atia, captures his very important historic role in such few words that are so apt. In an op-ed she wrote, George Floyd is this generation's Emmett Till. Just like his murder sparked the civil rights movement, George Floyd is the spark for the global protest we are witnessing in spite of the global deadly pandemic. I am sure you will appreciate my anxieties and why I am vocal on this subject. She goes on to say, her father cried, her Ghanaian father cried. That is how I weep for my boys. Here is a portion of an essay, in his own words, my son wrote about his life as a black male in America. Permit me to read it to you. He says, in his own words, realizing I'm the villain. Realizing I am the villain. When I was a child, I used to walk around not knowing that I was black. To me, I was just a kid. Nothing more, nothing less. Race was never tied into my being. It was not until the 7th grade that I realized that I was a black man. I remember that I would be walking home from school in my Fila shoes, my basketball shorts, worn out t-shirt from playing basketball during lunch, and my white socks up to my knees. Usually, while I was walking, I would find myself behind someone of a different skin tone. Being that I was in a city where there weren't many other races of people other than white or Hispanic, black people were the minority, big time. Typically, I would find myself walking behind one of the two, usually a girl, and they would turn their heads back and see me. In the quickest motion, they would immediately turn their heads back forward and proceed to walk as if they were in a speed walking race. Some would even cross the street. What stood out to me most about this, though, was the hint of almost fear they would give off in their faces and their eyes. Whenever our eyes met, they would have this look as if they were walking, turning their heads and seeing a criminal from the America's Most Wanted list. To see this look in someone's eyes for the first time and to know that this is because of you is one of the most enraging and saddening things you can experience. To know that you are feared by most until proven otherwise can make you feel really angry and frustrated, while at the same time make you feel very small in that instance, make you wish you weren't even yourself. It makes living very uncomfortable. If I could change the color of my skin every time I walked out in public amongst people different from me, I would. It was not my fault I was born black, nor was it even a fault to begin with. The idea of a black man ever threatening the United States of America is a fabricated story meant to keep the black man in mental enslavement. But what does the truth matter when the people who wrote the lies make up 70% of the United States population? To be a black man in America is to be the world's biggest villain. And the sooner you realize this, the less surprised you will be when you are treated as such. That's a letter from my son, a college kid now. And all these years, I couldn't protect him. I didn't know. My child came home from 7th grade feeling this way. I also got a letter from a mother, an African American mother. Surprisingly, I received letters from all the different groups. And this African American mother said to me, she sent me a letter. And this is an excerpt from her about her desperation for her son. She says, "Good morning, Pamela. Could you please sign a petition and use your platform to help me get as many signatures as you can? Many black children in our school districts are made fun of, assaulted, disciplined more severely than the other non-black students, and often marginalized. It's become so bad that my 7-year-old son has threatened suicide. If he has to return to school, he has threatened suicide. Both my son and daughter cry when I bring up returning to school. My son has been beat up and spat on, and the kids were never punished. However, my son was punished for yelling at them. They kept my husband and me from participating in the PTA. Wow. When I started discussing educational reform and equity training for the staff and administrators, I was shocked. I was kicked off the PTA, and the white president said in front of the principal that it is reverse racism for white people to have blacks on the PTA if the other members were uncomfortable. That was the last thing they said to me before they stopped allowing me entrance into the meetings. We went to the school board and we were told that our numbers are too low to require equity training. And when I talked about the psychological effects it has had on our children, they simply didn't care. They smirked as they said that the only way I would receive funding for psychological assessments was to take them to court. So please, help us by signing this petition and sending this out to as many of your contacts that you feel will support the cause as possible. Clearly, she says, Black lives don't matter at my kids' school. Wow. A 7-year-old threatened suicide to take his own life at the mere thought of going to school. And by the way, I have experienced something similar, not necessarily suicide, but I've had my child go to school and be so miserable, not be able to find friends to play with. And it was so obvious in a school where the majority are of a different race from her. She survived. Now, tell me, what am I to do with these anxieties? Especially since now my boys are behind the steering wheel. I can no longer shield them in a car seat. George Floyd said he couldn't breathe and he died. When he called out for his mother, Mama, Mama, I don't think it would be too far-fetched to think that most mothers wept. If we do nothing about it, who will be the next George Floyd? That is why, regardless of the coronavirus, the world has been protesting big time against a bigger virus called injustice from racism. And so, when the Black Lives Movement gives leadership, we are only too grateful. So unless you or anyone else has a better structure, is offering something better in terms of a movement, or can convince the administration to do something for police reform, we all will be marching alongside the Black Lives Movement. What wouldn't a mother do to protect her child? Mr. James Burks, founder of the African Marketplace, in response to my address to Ms. Nestride and Breitbart Media, gave me one of the best suggestions about the path forward towards unity between Africans, African Americans, and all people of African descent, all Black people. And we will apply the same logic to finding common ground. He said, it is a marathon, not a sprint. And so we must take it one step at a time. And so I suggest a few things. What's the way forward? It's often that we talk without concrete suggestions. Everybody can talk. We don't want to just be talking. We need to transform our experiences into actionable plans that will benefit our community. So I suggest a few. Black people must all focus on justice, not the Republican nor Democratic Party's agenda. Only look into agenda with politicians that will advance our cause. Let us choose to support candidates that we know will work for us. This way, we will not be beholden nor blackmailed by any political party. We must talk about current issues that plague us, and right now, the topic and the issue is police brutality. And we must do that with sincerity and honesty and no personal objectives or interest. America has become a country that is seen as a leading voice It has come a long way, I must acknowledge, but as a beacon of democracy that it is, I think we must agree it can do better. No one's perfect, right? The core issue now is not that Black people should start fighting to dissolve the police systems. I don't agree with defunding or dismantling. I do agree that we should reallocate the resources to improve our communities. I do agree with that, because we cannot afford a society without police and cannot trash or discredit the great officers who are doing their jobs and doing it well. We should rather focus on fixing the small percentage of bad apples, let's weed them out, that exist, and focus on propositions that will enable policing in our communities. I suggest, for instance, that Black people focus more on getting maybe Black kids, get our children to join the police force. Contrary to what most people think, they have many lucrative opportunities for great life and great retirement. And this will not only be financially empowering to them, but it will also be impactful in the safety of our communities. I also think that we must try to vote with our community leaders for propositions that will engage more community policing. I suggest that there should be a quota, for example, for every community, that there should be matching proportionality between the police and the citizens, and that we should have more Black police officers in areas where you have Black people, because they understand the culture and they don't feel threatened by the people they are policing, and so there will be more understanding. Well, I want to say we need to conclude by accepting this. No, all lives do not matter until Black lives matter equally. It's not just saying it, the world is saying it. You know in your hearts that is true. A message I got from one of my favorite immigrant influencers, who was white, by the way, really stood out for me. Gary Vaynerchuk, chairman of VaynerMedia, put it all in these words, as if to say, Black people, just stay aside, stay on the corners, and let me say this. How is anyone confused? How are we confused, he says. If you have hate in your mind, your time is coming. Every human with kindness in his heart is tired. Enough of all lives matter. If you can't love, how do you expect to be loved? Selfishness is everywhere. It's time for massive selflessness, especially for those who don't walk in the shoes of incredible men and women who face racism on a daily basis, whether it is conscious or unconscious. Silence is how hate breeds. It is enough. We must suffocate racism because it is the right thing to do. Choose to love someone else. I agree wholeheartedly with Gary. And as a Black woman, I am grateful, Gary, for your support. In all honesty, with all these examples, I wonder if in good conscience you can say this movement has no validity. Do all lives really matter if Black lives are not part of that equation? Now, regardless of the organization, don't you think that Black lives deserve special attention at this present time? Well, Candace, I really believe that not only is this movement valid, it is relevant, it is effective. It has been effective to the point where the world has joined in. The world has said, despite the coronavirus pandemic, they'll take their chance. People are taking their chances and going out on the streets. The world around us is now more than ever standing up and signaling that they now understand the plight of Black people in America. Just like I had my woke moment White people have taken to the streets, shielding black protesters from police. Major sports organizations, the NFL, the NHL, NASCAR, name them, are dismantling objects of past segregation. And finally, Colin Kaepernick is being validated for his kneeling and standing up against injustice. A top general, General Mark Milley, not only apologized for being part of the charade photo op in front of St. George's Church in DC, he also had this to say: "I am outraged by the senseless and brutal killing of George Floyd. His death amplified the pain, the frustration, and the fear that so many of our fellow Americans live with day in, day out," Milley said. The protests that have ensued not only speak to his killing, but also to the centuries of injustice toward African Americans. He added, saying, "We should all be proud that the vast majority of protests have been peaceful. And mind you, they've been provoked, tear-gassed, and yet, even in that provocation, not one altercation against a police officer." So Candace, is it possible that all these people of great accomplishments, of sound mind, diverse cultures, race, diverse, multi-generational, that they might have lost their minds or maybe misguided in seeing this for what it is? Racism. Endemic, systemic racism. Well, I understand that you've been on a mission to promote a political career, and that is fine and it's within your right. It's okay for you to pick whatever political side you want to, just like I do. But what I fear is your presentation of the narrative without any empathy for the family and many grieving Americans at this time, to justify your political agenda. I suggest that on matters of justice, we as Black people, that we speak one voice, regardless of politics, that we set politics aside and stand up for what is right. Because when you get pulled over, or when you're in the store, in the malls, all they see is the brown, beautiful you. They are not seeing the conservative Candace. And yes, you have millions of followers, but that is not all. There are those that don't know you, and you just never know. So when a cop pulls me over, all he sees is Pamela. He doesn't even care if I'm from Africa, if I was born from this culture, and that I might be up to something. So just like you, we are targeted. Again, Candace, I have great respect for you for being an alarmist on all Black issues. But this is an important role that you're carrying, and I plead with you to be responsible with this power that you wield right now. And I want to respectfully say that what is going on right now is something that has to bring consciousness to everyone that is Black. Let us focus on justice for now, justice for all Black people, rather than take the side of Black on Black crime. We will handle that in a forum where that will be the issue, where we will talk about what the complexities of mental enslavement have done to our community. It is neither strategic nor wise at this time when the world is joining Black lives to distract from this focus, because the consequence is deadly. I do host a show called Africa Speaks, which will be coming to my YouTube channel, TIMTV. And I've been fortunate to address some of these issues. I'll be releasing some of that content soon. I hope that I can get the chance to talk to you so we can go more in depth on some of these matters. So thank you, Candace, for giving me your time. I want to follow up with you, as my address to you was because of the influx of content and messages that came my way and that referenced you. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to what I had to say. I hope that this brings us closer to unity with all fighters for justice, people of all races. And I want to thank all the multi-generational, multicultural, everybody that is in this. I know it's going to work out this time because it's not just Black people fighting for themselves. The world has heard us, and for that we are grateful. So on that note, I want to say thank you from TIMTV and see you next time. Thanks for watching today's video. For more TIMTV videos about immigrant lifestyles, click on the subscribe button here below and ring the notification bell so you will be notified when we upload new content. We upload new content every single week. See you next time on TIMTV.